Payless Cashways was a building materials retailer that opened in 1930 and closed in 2001. Thank you for your suggestion.
At Payless Cashways, we've got your ticket to extra savings with special low prices now through Sunday. Protect your home, car, and boat with a portable fire extinguisher. Package of 2, just $7.95 after rebate. For only $19.95, get a beautiful oak toilet seat with brass hinges. Save $10. Add a 14 by 50-inch full-view door mirror, now an extra low $3.95. Hurry in for all the spectacular savings now through Sunday while supplies last at Payless Cashways Building Materials.
Don't do it yourself without us.
Payless Cashways.
Sanford Sam Furrow founded his business in 1930 with the purchase of a lumberyard in Pocahontas, Iowa, that was in default on its loans. Sanford Sam Furrow, who had by that time accumulated 25 years of experience in the lumberyards throughout Iowa and South Dakota, with the help from sons Sanford and Vernon and a colleague named John Evans, Furrow raised $10,000 to buy a defaulted lumberyard in Pocahontas, Iowa. Although the Great Depression seemed an unfavorable time to go into business, Sam Furrow asserted that he could not have gotten into the lumber business in a big way if times had been good. Banks were so desperate to recover any amount of money on foreclosed mortgages that Furrow was able to negotiate low purchase prices on 2 other lumberyards in the Iowa towns of Early and Webster City by mid-1932, thereby giving each of his sons a business to manage. Sam Furrow continued to work for the Fullerton Lumber Company, with which he had been employed since 1912, and he named his Pocahontas business the Kiefer Wolf Lumber Company to conceal the fact of his ownership. When the Fullerton Lumber Company discovered Sam's duplicity in 1933, he quit and went to work at the renamed Pocahontas Lumber Store. The 3-store chain carried small selections, focusing primarily on lumber, paint, and builder's hardware in one 80 to 100 square foot room. Furrow's lumberyards earned steady profits during the 1930s by establishing comprehensive contracts with insurance companies, which repossessed and repaired numerous dilapidated farms during the Depression. Sam Furrow soon began challenging established business practices in the regional building materials industry, first taken on the Lumber Trust. This amalgamation of businesses were linked by a mutually beneficial price-fixing agreement that helped everyone but the customer. Furrow launched his Webster County Lumber Store in Fort Dodge, Iowa in 1937 by advertising live and let live prices, and that were set without regard to the Lumber Trust. Delighted, customers flocked to the business, substantiating Furrow's notion that high sales volume and not the highest margin the market would bear was the key to success in his chosen field. He gradually increased merchandise selections at his yards, adding plasterboard, ceiling tiles, insulation, and asphalt shingles, and by the end of the decade, Furrow's stores were offering more than 200 products. After World War II, John Evans and Sam Furrow split their partnership. Furrow kept all but the Fort Dodge and Webster City yards, and in 1947 he opened a new location in Iowa Falls, Iowa, to be managed by his son Vern. There, Vern first experimented with the cash and carry policy that would later be applied chain-wide. The change reflected shifts in the store's customer base and its terms. Before this time, most customers were professional contractors accustomed to making large orders on credit. After the war, however, many retail suppliers to construction outfits had trouble collecting on accounts receivable. Rising lumberyard prices reflected those difficulties. At the same time, increasing numbers of laymen began to circumvent professional repairmen's high rates by tackling their own home repair and improvement projects. Low cash and carry prices, as well as a more aggressive direct mail advertising, attracted this new class of do-it-yourselfers and bolstered the building supplier's cash flow. The loose-knit chain that would become Payless Cashways grew rather spontaneously during these early decades. The family members and longtime colleagues who opened new locations contributed to each new store's startup costs and therefore were entitled to share of the profits. This arrangement fostered decentralization and self-motivation among individual store managers, considered a major element of the chain's early success. In the 1950s, however, the Furrows instituted several changes that made the loose-knit lumber yards more of a modern retail chain. The company eventually adopted the Payless Cashways name, but new locations were added using Furrows due to trademark issues in Texas, Oregon, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, California, and Indiana. For example, in Indiana, Payless was a grocery store chain. By 1954, there were 8 stores. Within a year, the Furrows brought all of the chain's accounting under one firm and unified advertising and promotion. Under the name Payless Cashways, the stores adopted a logo featuring a curved red arrow and Payless Pete, a caricature of a lumberjack. By the end of the decade, the chain had added stores in Minnesota, Illinois, and Arizona. In the 1960s, the company expanded into New Mexico, Colorado, and Nebraska before taking the company public as Payless Cashways, Inc. in 1969, with the chain having 16 stores. 4 decades of active family management came to an end in 1971 when Vernon Furrow retired. Payless Cashways focused on the growth in the 1970s, concentrating on establishing new stores, expanding and remodeling existing stores, and increasing each location's product line. The company also established its construction division, anticipating dramatic growth in that segment. By the end of the 1970s, Payless boasted 68 stores in 14 states and 9 distribution centers. Sites in Texas, Oregon, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, California, and Indiana were also added under the name of Furrows due to trademark conflicts in several markets, as I had mentioned before. By 1981, Payless Cashways was the 5th largest chain in the industry, and its annual sales growth in the last half of the 1970s had doubled the industry average. The growth rate at Payless continued. The chain doubled in size from 1979 to 1984, adding 39 stores in 1984 alone, including 14 prime home improvement centers in Colorado and Nevada, as well as Somerville Lumber in Massachusetts. Later in the decade, a takeover attempt by Asher Edelman prompted yet another major change at Payless Cashways. In 1988, the company marshaled a unique group of investors under the name PCI Acquisition to take the company private. Although the leveraged buyout saved Payless from takeover, it was not an unqualified success. The company did not have a single year of profitability during the 5 years it was private, as a recession in its core Midwest and Southwest markets, high debt from the buyout, and competition from up-and-coming category killer Home Depot combined to slow sales growth, weaken margins, and depress operating earnings. The Payless Cashways stock buyback left the company saddled with massive debt that stopped their expansion. The retailer stagnation caused them to be left behind by the big box home centers such as Builder Square, Home Base, and later the emerging Home Depot and Lowe's chains. The company struggled through the 90s with moderate successes and recurrent failures, and never regained the momentum of their first wave of expansion. In July of 1997, Payless Cashways filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The last straw for Payless Cashways was the burst of the dot-com bubble that left many banks unwilling to help the company continue its operations. Sales in 2000 fell by more than 17%, while the company posted a $20.6 million loss in net income. A total of 22 stores were closed that year. In 2001, the firm closed 42 stores by August after declaring Chapter 11 bankruptcy yet again in June. Never able to regain its edge in the highly competitive industry, Payless Cashways announced in September of 2001 that they would be closing and liquidating. So what are some of your favorite memories of this place? Leave a comment or a suggestion for a future video below. Be sure to hit that like button. Thanks for watching.